Yes, you guys, welcome back. I'm Nini FC, this is Blue Lions TV, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, and we have a ton of things to discuss and break down after the crazy week that happened at Chelsea recently. From poor performances we've seen versus Man City and Brighton, to the issues we're seeing with Lukaku, as well as our difficulties in the January window as well too. You guys, I'm very happy to introduce you and bring on special guest in George Benson. How you doing, man?
I'm very, very well. I think this has been requested for so long. If it didn't happen in the first month of 2022, then I think it would never have happened. So I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
See you guys. We see the comments. We hear what you guys are saying. We listen to you. We're making it happen now. Big things in 2022. But yeah, man, without wasting any time at all, let's get straight into the game last night against Brighton. Now, for me, I'm really not even surprised that we even picked up a draw against them. I kind of just predicted we would draw against them after seeing how well they played against us before, after seeing like their season under Graham Potter, a very underrated manager, really got Brighton playing some great football. In the end, I guess it was like a good point, which is kind of disappointing considering that we all thought that this season we were going to be in a title race against Man City and Liverpool. So for you, what were your thoughts after last night's game?
You know, it's funny. I watched your match review and we both said pretty much the same thing in the first couple sentences. I was like, well, if you're a betting man, you'd have definitely stuck a few quid on 1-1. This game had it written all over it. And I think I heard somewhere like Brighton have drawn over 40% of their matches that Graham Potter's been their manager in the Premier League, which is just outrageous. But to be honest, I think once again, we were lucky to get a point against Brighton twice. I honestly think they were better than us both times, quite convincingly. Yeah. And I think the biggest concern for me last night was just how abject we looked, how Thomas Tuchel, for the first time, I think more so in this game than any other match I've ever seen from him, he just looked as though he felt like he was being beat. You know, I feel like metaphorically you could see it on his face. You know, he knows all of a sudden we're not talking about this free-flowing left wing-backs playing as left forwards, right wing-backs as right forwards anymore. Look at where all the goals are coming from. Look how good Chelsea are. We might win the bloody league. That feels like it is so far away now that last night's draw, even though it was a point, felt 5 times worse than a defeat to City, and even that was bad.
I don't know. It's I don't know. For me, a part of it is also understanding, you know, injuries, they're not helpful. We see them happen time and time again. COVID as well has really affected us compared to a lot of other clubs as well too. You know, it's the wrong players at the wrong time. But I don't know, I always feel personally sometimes, is it the way we play? Like, we are a team that really likes to keep possession of the ball. We really like to play a lot of these like sideways, horizontal passes, left to right, left to right. And I guess like the sick thing about having like Joel and Reece James at the time was that because these guys were like dynamic, you know, they're fast, they can get in behind, they have the ability to score as well too, and like, you know, attack those spaces inside the books. I feel like they were so key in giving us that fluidity, where, you know, they allowed us to be vertical in those moments to like play that killer ball in behind. You know, you're seeing Jorginho sometimes splitting defenses open with like a nice through pass, which you don't see all the time otherwise. And it's just like when you miss out on key players like that, and then you have to rely on maybe like an Alonso and Azpilicueta, who, you know, they're getting older, and we know that they've never really been known for like that physicality, that type of pace. I feel like they can also maybe affects that speed in which we can play at in times. And I don't know, like just seeing like Lamptey and like Cucurella yesterday, like the difference between what they were bringing to that Brighton team. Like Lamptey, that run when he just like took out 3-4 of our players and just like boom, with surgical precision. I feel like it's hard for Tuchel to be able to, you know, maybe find the right team at times when he has to maybe rely upon certain players that don't necessarily play his style of football to like maximum capacity.
Yeah, I think the word dynamic was the one there that I think is just the absolute overriding thing of this whole thing. I think what made Chelsea so difficult to predict and so difficult to set up against at the beginning of the season was the fact that nobody had seen, at least in my memory in the Premier League, the only thing I can think of is Conte when he was with us. But even then, it was nowhere near as extreme with Chilwell and Reece James often being the actual most advanced players when you look at the map and thinking like, how are these guys spending more time ahead of the striker or a Mount or playing on the wings? I'm like, well, that's what made Chelsea so unpredictable. Whereas now, like you said, there's so many sideways passes. There's a huge reluctance to take on the final man. There is a severe lack of shooting from outside the area. Teams know they can sit with 5 or 6 back, waiting for Chelsea to keep trying to play those intricate little passes that, to be quite honest, I believe the quality was there until a few weeks ago. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, you know what? It's all right if you want to play that way, because if you were good enough, we would win games like this with no problem at all, even with the injuries we have. But now I'm thinking, well, is this guy good enough? Is that guy good enough? Like, can we even do this together as a team? Because individually, I don't think the quality's there.
Yeah, and I fully agree. I do think maybe certain individuals as well have to look at themselves. I think one player I've been a bit disappointed in recently has been Hudson-Odoi. I feel like, I get the impression, of course, when he was close to wanting to sign for Dortmund on loan, Tuchel spoke to him, they listened to him, and Tuchel was like, okay, this season, I'm going to play you in your more preferred position, which has meant that Pulisic now is playing the Hudson-Odoi role from last season. And I do feel at times, every now and then Callum will play the right passing behind and keep that move going. But I just think a lot of times when it comes to things like that willingness to take his man on, I don't really see it enough as I really want to for a guy that's really young and is, this is what I mean. The manager's giving you this opportunity now to really just like express yourself. You got to take it with both hands. And I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing much of the goal threat or the ability to just change the dynamic of the game at times. I think it's lots of safe balls and safe crosses, and I don't think that really helps necessarily. And of course, I guess maybe the biggest conundrum too in the team right now is Lukaku. And it's mad because last season, Kai Havertz playing that role, Werner alongside him, Mount, etc., etc. We looked more maybe cohesive as a team, even though Kai necessarily wasn't actually getting on the end of these moves and scoring the goals. I guess he played a role to get others in them positions. And now Lukaku's come and he's like that more focal point presence. It feels like we're seeing a ton of disconnects and not many signs of improvement. How did you find him last night?
To be honest, I was very, very upset with what he did. And I'm a very emotional football fan, and I'm happy to let things get span in my little way of being like, I'm really, really mad at you right now. And if you didn't play for Chelsea again, no problem whatsoever. But then obviously with time comes a bit more rational thought, a bit more perspective perhaps. But it's, for me, I think what the underlying issue is, and I spoke about this today on my own channel, I think the underlying issue is that we had the issue of injuries to deal with. We had the COVID issues, we had the game pile-up, which was the main concern. That was like, well, all right, we're a bit hard done by here. We've got room to complain, but then we managed to, results were bad, but at least we managed to hold our own in the sense of not letting it spiral out of control. And then you throw in onto the top of that, this Lukaku issue, and then to me, an absolute reluctance to actually come off the back of that issue and be like, okay, well, I didn't think it was a big deal, but everybody else seems to think so. The world media, the Chelsea fans, you'd expect, at least even from the amount of effort and body language from him, for him to actually be putting in a little bit more of a shift. Like, I don't care how the service was to him last night. To touch the ball 8 times, like if we're playing against Barcelona of old or Man City, maybe that could be a first half if they're absolutely blowing us off the park. But it's Brighton. You came in for so much money off the back of such an amazing season. And a lot's changed, and it might not be to the nature of which you envisaged it to be and want it to be. But I expect so much more. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, if he's not dropped in the next game, if Lukaku starts against Spurs, I'm going to be fuming. Even though I've got 1 hour to be annoyed, and he might score in the first 5 minutes against Spurs, and then we're all like, oh, wonderful. But that's what he has to do now. It's got to that point where if he doesn't score and he's ineffective the way he was last night, I'm going to stay pissed. And a lot of others will as well. Especially when you've got players like Tammy Abraham, who absolutely wanted to be here, but, it didn't work out for him. But look how well he's doing. Look at Armando Broja.
Yeah.
We can compare all we like, but for me at least, I need to at least see some very, very consistent effort. And if it isn't going how you want it to go, then make it go the way that you want it to go by actually getting involved and being that player who can get the bit between their teeth and rally these guys together. Because right now we look like a bunch of disjointed idiots out on the field. Yeah,
you're right. And you know what? I want to touch and expand upon this conversation in the next point. But just to wrap up this discussion of Brighton, you're looking at a few stats, of course, infamously right now, since November, we've won 1 more game than Norwich City and 8 fewer than Man City. Like, of course, I wanted to make a really clear point in my review yesterday with the fact that, unfortunately, we have a Man City team to compete with in the Premier League now if we have any hopes of winning the title again, which has to be the ambition. Otherwise, what is the point of anything at the club, really? And it's just like, because Man City have set the bar so high, it means that it's raised competition levels even higher now. And that means I feel like we have to maybe re-strategize some of the things we do to find a way to like challenge with like our financial constraints, and then at the same time be able to, maybe build more of an identity which can help us in the long term be able to consistently go for titles, silverware trophies, instead of like this like short-termist approach, in which for me, I feel like we benefit more of like the talents of the manager compared to anything the club's really giving them, to be honest. And it can't work forever. Another stat as well too, of course, under Tuchel now, I think since like 2016, when he was at Dortmund, no winning 4 games, 3 draws, 1 loss. It's very uncharacteristic, and that point tally right now is basically identical to Lampard's when he left. Obviously context is different, of course, but just focusing on that, we are in that time again where the difficulties are mounting, the pressure's there. I'd imagine there'd be a little bit of pressure with the teammates as well too, and let's hope that things and some fortune can turn around, and I'm praying that Reece James can come back as quickly as possible, and hopefully we get some business done. But I think right now, let's like expand further on Romelu Lukaku. So yeah, you made that point, Broja, Tammy Abraham. I feel it's kind of funny that, how often I'll be letting players go for like, pretty decent money, peanuts most of the time, and they go off to impress, and then we look at the qualities that they're showing for these clubs, and it's just like we just kind of misuse them. I mean, when you don't really appreciate them. And the fact that, like last season after we won the Champions League, all the reports were saying that we'd have like a 200 million war chest, and in the end we kind of sold nearly all our best young talent to fund one move for Lukaku, who's kind of showing that he does have some difficulties in the system right now. And let me just tell you this, my friend brought up a really good point to me, actually, and he said that one thing that he's seen a lot of the times is that Lukaku, his unwillingness to like press, to like work hard, to run in that sense, it puts more pressure on his attacking players and teammates around him, like in particular Mason Mount. Like when Mount was playing alongside him, Mount's doing a lot of dirty work that does not really benefit in his game. Yet when Kai Havertz came on, that gets distributed more evenly, and then Mount maybe can be in better positions to do something. Do you feel like there could be a slight possibility that maybe the Lukaku signing could have been a little bit of like another big money signing mistake?
Again, I think it's too soon. I think at the moment it's very easy to kind of jump on that bandwagon and say, yeah, this was one big mistake. I still want to back Lukaku because I feel like if I don't want to back him now, then what's the bloody point? If he's going to play, he's a £100 million man. I personally think at least for the next game, he has to be dropped. And Kai Havertz has to come in and be given a chance, because I think what Tuchel's biggest issue is right now is that we have absolutely no idea what front line he's going to pick, and I don't think he does either. I really don't. I think it's become again once more because of things that are not in his control. I think it's got to a point where I'm sure a question is being asked the day before a match saying, is it all of you guys feel fit enough to start? Do you feel like you're ready to play again? Like, can you do another 90? And I think that's what it might have got to now, where it's like maybe he's not actually being able to implement the changes strategically to what he wanted to do to accommodate for the lack of Chilwell and James, simply because everybody's just burnt into the ground. I had a conversation today with a friend of mine who he's a football fan, but like not the level that we are, and they make these comments where it's like, oh, they're professional footballers. I'm like, dude, that don't even try and start that conversation with me.
Yeah, for sure.
It's bigger, it's deeper, and at the intensity that these guys are playing at, to have maybe one day of tactical training and one day of recovery and then another game, it is farcical. And I think Chelsea have obviously dropped more points than anybody else because we have had the absolute worst luck out of every single team in the Premier League, in my opinion. And it's had a knock-on effect to us. But keeping to the Lukaku point, as I deviated off there for a second, I just think I think his attitude is the problem. Because I think his attitude is preventing him from actually doing the things that we know he can do. Like, he can press. I think Lukaku for Belgium, when he drifts off to that right wing, players like Mount, Havertz, Callum Hudson-Odoi, all of them, Pulisic, Ziyech, all have that ability to rotate around that front three. They can all play on either side. If those runs are being made, that's dynamism. That's dynamic. That's how you start to draw two Brighton centre-backs out. They've got big centre-halves, decent centre-halves. If he makes a run down that right channel and frees up space in the middle, then it becomes less predictable. Chelsea become less monotonous with the way that we're trying to penetrate defences. And I think at the moment, his unwillingness to do any of that kind of stuff just makes him so easy to defend against. Like City at the weekend. John Stones and Laporte are big defenders, but Lukaku is an absolute brute of a bloke. Yeah, they bullied him. He looked like me up there. Like I could have looked the same. Like I would have been humiliated. That's what he was. He was humiliated. He looks like a shell of the player that we know he can be, and he's a big bloke. Yeah. You could never guess that from watching him in the last two games. Yeah, nah, you're right. I know that he's never really been amazing, like trying to control these aerial balls and compete aerially. You'd like to think it could be something he adds to his game, because sometimes, things don't always go the way you plan in training and you have to adapt in game, and it can be really useful to have like your striker as like that outlet where you can just like play these balls over the top and relieve that pressure quickly. But like even from doing that, when I looked at that Man City game, for example, I just felt like the options around him is not really there. And like since Everton, I think the real big thing to really help unlock Lukaku is having guys that kind of play close to him and off of him. Like Belgium, he's got Hazard cutting in, he's got De Bruyne looking to play off of him and make those runs in behind or use him as a platform to take shots. And a lot of times when I look at him, I don't really see anyone close to him that would even benefit some of these layoff passes. I don't see a Mount near him. I don't see a Ziyech near him or even a Havertz. And I just think that, this is one thing I wanted to ask you as well too. Ideally, what out of all the attacking players we have, what is the best combination we can use? Because so far, Tuchel has used 11 different attacking combinations, which is it's a lot. And it's like, on one hand, Lukaku definitely can be he can be critiqued for sure. But I feel like sometimes it's 50-50. Like we're stuck in like this rock and a hard place. And when you have 11 different combinations, like how are you supposed to build like a real understanding with anyone? You can't. Answer and the factual one. I don't think anybody can question the fact that Chelsea are certainly not doing better because we have so many players who can play in attacking positions, which means that the argument of teams won't know what's coming doesn't exist at this level. That's not a thing. But I think at the moment, I doubt you're going to agree with this one. But I personally would go back to Timo Werner on the left, Kai Havertz through the middle with Mason on the right. Yeah. Because I think what that does is it is so unpredictable. I think Havertz can, and I really believe in Havertz. This is why I sell this one to myself so often, because I think Kai Havertz is a ticking time bomb. And I think if Kai Havertz is given a run of 3 or 4 games, even going through the middle, I think he could explode. I really think he's on the verge of just like, if he can not keep catching variants of the C word and stay please just stay fit and stay healthy, and then I think he can explode. And I think him and Mount link up incredibly well. We know that's a narrative that's been like bored to the ground because it's just fact. And I think Timo, as much as he can't finish his dinner, even if it's served up with flipping chocolate sauce on top. And sauerkraut and everything and bratwurst and all of that. Oh, the list goes on. The list does go on. But I think, again, I know he's so wasteful, and sometimes, like last night, he just runs into players and then falls to the floor. But Callum has frustrated me so much. I think Callum's finishing is no better than Timo Werner's. I think Christian Pulisic, again, has been very unlucky with the way he's been played, but at the moment I've got no faith in him. And I certainly wouldn't have Ziyech on the left. And I think there's a reason why that front three won us the Champions League. And I think all of those 3 players are such great friends for a start. There's not going to be any of this looking at each other like, And you see the conversations last night, the Ziyech Lukaku ones. I would love to know what was said, but it's just not great. They're not having a lovely time and organising who's buying the bottle of red for the journey home in the back seat of the bus. So I think Chelsea at the moment need to go back to starting players and playing with a team who are actually really willing to work for one another.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, we might need to rely on £100 million man Lukaku to come off the bench to win us a game. But then surely that is the duty of all of these players to be like, right, well, yeah, we're in a squad. We are the European champions. We're currently in a big funk. And if it isn't my turn now, that's because I don't deserve it. That's because I didn't take my turn, or I didn't take my opportunity when it was given to me last night, 4 days ago. So, in my opinion, I would go back to this front three that won us the Champions League.
Yeah.
Right now, for the next game. For Spurs, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair point. I mean, obviously, like, I was mentioning that point about just like balancing out and sharing out their workloads, and like all three, they did work hard. They did close their fullbacks down. They did press in tandem. What I found interesting though is that really, and this is the thing I noticed really about how our strikers are really using our system. They're not really the guys that get on the end of the moves. They're the players that maybe make spaces for the other guys. I definitely think a lineup that includes Mount and Havertz, for me, I think that's probably the best too. And it depends on the strikers you're saying. But I don't, touching on that point more. Werner's best stuff he did under Tuchel last season was a lot of those runs in the left channel and behind, in which he was then setting up your ZX and playing these balls across goal, or taking players out with his speeds in behind to free up spaces for others. Like when we scored that goal in the Champions League final against Man City, a Werner run also helped create that space for Kai Havertz, for Mount to then play that, that famous through ball pass that straight to his feet. And it's just like, obviously Tuchel did have an impact and a role in, looking at Lukaku and agreeing upon whether he's the right target for us. And a part of me would have thought that, okay, he's a smart guy. He knows that he'd have to make some adaptation if you are going to bring Lukaku to the squad and use him. And it does feel like whatever theories he had, they haven't really come to fruition at this point in time. I think that Lukaku, if you're going to kind of spend 100 million on someone to be someone that makes space for others, for the wing backs and for the cams, then what really is the point if you had a Kai Havertz already in that sense, So it's weird, because I do agree, if I was being cold and ruthless, boom, you're out the team now and it's up to you to figure something out. But then on another hand, I'm thinking, okay, we invested so much money, and it was quite clear when we spoke to Lukaku as well in the summer that there was going to be adaptations made to try and get him into the team. But then they clearly aren't working. And it's just like, we've spent now 150 mil on strikers that really the main role is to bring others into the game instead of being the ones to be the difference maker. And it's just like, is that in itself the most sustainable way to build success and to constantly challenge?
I think at the moment, in order for us to, it sounds ludicrous, and I'm not for 1 second saying that I want this to happen.
Yeah.
But in order for Chelsea to compete with an engine like Manchester City, we're going to have to flipping fire the manager again and kick these players up the backside, and someone come in with something totally different the teams can't predict. That's the reality of, if we're talking about how do we immediately look at what we have or what we don't have, and either use what we have or buy something we don't and win something. At this point, if we hadn't have spent that 100 million on Lukaku in the summer, and we'd have kept Tammy Abraham, would we be in a better position now, in your opinion, if we'd have kept Tammy and not bought Romelu Lukaku?
I mean, personally, I think, it's a hard one. It's a hard one, because on one hand, I kind of think maybe there'd be no difference, and I agree, we could have kept Tammy. But then I think, why was Tuchel so reluctant to even want to bring him on the bench? There were times when we had 3 left backs on and Tammy just was not in the team, and I found that quite puzzling at the time, because Tammy did a lot of the things he'd want. He works really hard, runs the channels, and as we saw that season as well, he can really link up well with your Havertz's, your Mounts and other players. And it's just was there not enough in him for you to grow and improve that and build upon that, when you can do that for Werner's and other players? That's another interesting point. But at the same time, look at some of the goals Lukaku scored, where he, in brief games this season, he scored 8 goals so far. Some of those goals have been real match winners for us, in which maybe in other games last season, we're not going to have that same output. You look at the Aston Villa games, for example, where I don't know if anyone else really scores that type of goal that Lukaku does. So I really feel like there needs to be a glue that can really just like mesh some of these qualities together. I can't believe that 300 million's been wasted on like attacking players, because I mean, what's that really saying about the structures at the club then if we can make this mistake time and time again? But then I guess we have a history. You know, you look at your Torreses, your Maratas, your Shevchenkos, you know, a lot of guys sign for big money. They're not really having that impact that you're kind of expecting they would with that investment you're putting into them. So yeah, I don't want to like, you know, you guys listening, you know, I'm not here saying, you know, I've got all the perfect answers. Like, there's a lot of things I'm still like thinking about and still trying to like understand what is the best solution to things. And it's just like, I'm not saying that if I don't know, then how is Tuchel going to know? But like, you know, of course, I can imagine that this is going to be even harder for Tuchel to really, you know, find what the answer is.
I think the toughest bit is all of the examples we've just given vindicate the current issue. It's like in the past, there have clearly been signings that have been made from Chelsea in an attacking sense that are not necessarily the choice of the manager, who the club envisaged to take the club forward with that player for, say, 18 months to 2 years, because the club hasn't operated that way. Due to the way the club is run, we know that when players come in, they're going to be the ones who are staying as flagship holders of the club, but the manager's going to change. Whereas now that was supposed to be different. Tuchel wanted Romelu Lukaku. The club wanted Romelu Lukaku. Romelu Lukaku supposedly wanted to come to the club. So it should have been a dream signing. But again, over and over again, we see that this doesn't happen. But I think in this case with Lukaku, he was brought in as like, right, it didn't work out. It didn't solve our issue. This has and will. And it hasn't. So now everyone's kind of looking around like, who do we blame? And I think the players are also doing the same. Lukaku does it every game. He looks around at his teammates and he's like, why aren't you doing this? And they're like, well, why aren't you doing that? And it's like, no wonder we can't get a decent shot away on goal. It took him 72 bloody minutes to make the Brighton keeper make a save last night. The shot against Ederson, everyone's like, oh, what an amazing save from Ederson. Are you serious? Did you see that? I could have guessed exactly where that ball was going to land if someone was like, but you know, like when you're a kid and you look at these things, like spot the difference. You can move the ball, pick it up, and put it exactly where he shot it. It's not solving the problem because the confidence at the moment just isn't there. His early season form, like you said, Villa, he won the game for us against Zenit too. Those goals really got us talking. But then at that time, we had the most dynamic team in the league. We had Reece James and Ben Chilwell playing as two of the best wing-backs in world football. Now we don't have that. So I think at the moment it's just a conglomerate of all of the issues. But at the end of the day, when things aren't going well, you look at your striker, especially when you spent 100 mil on him, and think, well, pull us out the mud, mate. You're not doing it. We're sinking deeper and deeper as a result of trying to accommodate this bloke. Sounds very harsh and very aggressive, but
I feel like it's I think it's a real concern and issue. And I do think Lukaku plays a big part in things. I definitely think there's a lot of like interesting like conversations around this whole signing. For example, you know, you could argue on the Tuchel, you know, does this team necessarily create like a high volume of like, you know, high XG opportunities inside the books? We don't really tend to do that. And it's just like, you know, players are still human beings. I'm not just for Lukaku, but for everyone who's missed chances for us over the past 12 months. If you feel like if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, there's even more pressure on you in those moments than to have to take advantage. And it's just like, you know, you can't necessarily go by off that like individual cool-headed brilliance, especially like in a high pressure, high level competition like the Premier League, where, you know, like every like slight mental advantage you have, like things like good form, you know, that there's a reason why that can carry on for a handful of games, why you have to take advantage of that. I just feel like with how we play ultimately, our possession game, which is kind of a lot of times for me, it's about more like containment in the sense of we want to stop opposition from creating dangerous counterattacks against us. This is why the attacking guys have to work really hard up front, and when they drop deep as well too. And this is why we have to keep moving the ball from side to side, because it's just like we're playing a patient game, trying to like draw out the opposition to try and come and get us. But like, you know, a lot of times as we've seen, a lot of these teams, if they notice that, they don't really care to press us. And we have picked up quite a few disappointing results against teams in the bottom half of the table over the past 12 months, in which you're kind of expecting these really are more of a key games to win than some of the big games in the league sometimes, because these are like the guaranteed points that allow you to like build momentum and like do, you know, mount a title challenge. And I just think that ultimately, when you have this disconnect between like maybe half the team are very comfortable playing that possession game and moving it side to side, well, the attacking guys, a lot of these guys kind of rely on that quick, service, like quick ball to feet, that ball over the top. Havertz is a movement type of player. Werner's a movement type of player. Lukaku's a movement type of player. Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi are like wide players that needs they need to get the ball there quickly as well. You know what I mean? And I think that the reason why Mount probably is the best man out of all of them is because he's just so multifaceted that he's the only one that can do anything and everything, really, in my opinion. But it's just like, for me, this is like the ultimate thing. Like, what is really the best way to unlock the attack? Because right now, I've 11 different attacking combinations. That's a crazy amount.
Yeah, I did a video about this literally before we started talking, and I stick by what I said. I was thinking, like, when you finish a video and you're like, do I actually really believe? Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, on it, nobody has the answer. I think there's no better manager for our football club than Thomas Tuchel, in my opinion. I think he's absolutely perfect fit, and I wouldn't name a single bloke on the planet who I'd rather have than him. Yeah. And I think right now, he has no idea. And I think the point I made earlier, I'm not saying I know it all, but I think it's probably quite accurate. Players right now are struggling. They're tired. And I don't necessarily think Tuchel can really, really home in on what he wants them to do because he doesn't know who's going to be ready. Mm-hmm. So I think when we're seeing this lack of combinations, when we're seeing some atrocious link up in the final third or lack of just it doesn't exist. Yeah. And I think the reason for that is at the moment, we're not actually training to get better at these things. I think we are literally just going by game, getting it done because we have to. And I think that attitude's never going to win you anything. It's only going to get you what we've seen, which is mediocrity. The players are still far better than 80% of these players in the other Premier League teams.
Yeah.
Fact. Yeah. But we just haven't got that extra little bit to beat teams like Brighton, who are going to give absolutely everything, because for them, like Tuchel said, the fans at the end of that game were like, we just drew with the European champions again. Look how good we were. It's like, yes, and these players think the same thing, Look at Lamptey, Cucurella last night. Yeah. Perfect examples. Both of those two were getting ahead of Aspi and Alonso because they are so direct, very, very good defensively too, but they offer something totally different, which means that Chelsea are worried about what these two are going to do. Yeah. Meanwhile, the attackers are still tying their shoelaces in their brains. I honestly think that's what it is. Like, it sounds like a really stupid way of saying it, but that's kind of how I picture it right now.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And like, for me, there's even a conversation around like, how does the ball necessarily help? Yeah, because does Tuchel ideally, does he want to have slow wing backs in a wing back system? Like, ideally, like we mentioned, the difference that Lamptey and Cucurella were making in that game last night, and like if you have like a big attack, like you see the importance in which the wing backs and supplement the attack. And when you have poor quality, no legs, no physicality, no pace in these key positions in your wing back system, then how is that really going to benefit the whole team? And I don't know. A part of me will think as well too. We can't forget. We know the reports that Tuchel kind of wanted to get a wing back as well too. We know that we want to get one in January, and I mean, look, it's literally 12 more days until the month's gonna end, and I guarantee we won't get one until maybe the final few days, as always, because we're still looking at targets and still assessing the market and assessing. Do big clubs really do that? If you want to like have plans to win, like, do you do that? I'm not too sure, to be honest. And for me, this is how you kind of undermine the manager and make it hard, because like I'm saying, like when Man City have injuries to like key players, whatever, is the whole system then collapsing? Liverpool, when it happens to them, and I know last season, but they had like a crazy injury crisis where, you know what I mean, but they still kind of played their football a bit. But imagine if they lost guys like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. Well, it's okay. They got options in behind them that can also do the same roles that they need. But with us, once some of these guys are out the team, the rest of the squad guys aren't suited to take on that role, and of course keep that momentum in the team. And I think this is why we keep seeing these issues where every time injuries, December comes, we're always screwed.
Yeah, I think the identity of the Liverpools and the Man Cities is something that's obviously now been crafted so that when these things happen, they can win enough points to still be in the conversation. That's the gap that we're trying to bridge right now. It isn't, let's try and spend 100 mil and then we beat Man City to the Premier League. It's no, we've got to look at this opportunity, in my opinion, we've got to look at this opportunity of having a really, really top manager with enough really top players, knowing that eventually there is going to be something there that clicks. And it already clicked. That's the key bit. It already clicked. Before all of these injuries, COVID issues, blah, blah, it had clicked. We were up there. We were competing and people were looking at Chelsea thinking, wow, look at this team. Look what he's done in 7 months, 6 months, regardless of even winning the Champions League. At the beginning of this season, we were playing better football than we did against City in the final. Fact.
Yeah.
So I think at this moment in time, we've just got to be realistic with where we're at present right now, today, 19th of January 2022, and think, well, you know, we've had the kitchen sink thrown at us in terms of bad luck. And it is, well, it's not in our hands, because if Spurs win all their games in hand, they go ahead of us. If Arsenal score 20-odd goals, which they definitely won't, they'll go ahead of us if they win their 3. But it is still in our hands. Chelsea have still got, no matter, again, this is also the problem now. It's like, yeah, we're missing so many players, but look at that starting 11 last night. You're telling me we can't beat Brighton? No, come on. Absolutely not. And I think, again, like we've said throughout the whole video, it's trying to find how we stop all of these draws, we stop all of these feeble attacking performances. I think what he needs to do now is he needs to really start homing in, despite however many days we have to train. It's like, how are we going to play? This is how we're going to play, and you are my 3 players to go out there and do that. Do it against Spurs, and then do it again the following week. You're playing 2 in a row. Stay fit. Do your ice baths after training, whatever it is to give you that little bit of extra edge. That is now got to home in on those little things.
And stick to one, even if they have a bad game the next game, at least stick to one just so they can build a little bit of understanding with each other. And, you know, let's see what happens. But of course now, you know, normally during times like this, you know, Tuchel comes back firing. You know what I mean? I've seen this guy at Dortmund, at Paris Saint-Germain. I still feel like we're like kind of halfway in this Tuchel project, and there's a lot better things to come in the future, man. But you know, it's getting serious now. But yeah, I feel like we've kind of covered a ton of angles with what's happened this week, man. George, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really enjoyable hearing your thoughts as well. Of course, I hope you guys enjoy. Of course, the comment section. Of course, you guys, in the description, you'll find links to George Benson's recent video, and of course in the card above as well too. George, any final words?
No, just thank you very much. I actually feel better about the situation now. I don't know why. I think it's because like we had a good chat here, you know. Even though what we say has no bearing on it whatsoever, at least it's kind of like allowed it to settle a little bit. You know, it's like it makes a bit more sense in my head now. I don't know if that's very arrogant or not, but like, it does. You know,
like being fans like us too, like we'll literally just be pondering about this in our heads, left, right, and center, just like driving ourselves crazy. So it's a good outlet to be able to just like talk it out, man. And yeah, let's hope we can do a lot more collabs like this throughout 2022. But you guys, on that note, I'm gonna wrap things up, keep things moving. There is gonna be a live stream later tonight as well too, so you guys stay tuned for this. It'll be a big one. I'm the EFC, this is Blue Lions CV. Catch you guys there with some more videos. Cool.